Daddy, her baby isn't moving. Sophia Romano pressed both palms flat against the cold car window, her breath fogging the glass, her voice so quiet it barely existed. But Vincent heard it, every syllable, because in 30 years of running the most feared criminal empire in Chicago, nothing had ever hit him like those 5 words from his 7-year-old daughter. He turned his head slowly toward the corner, and that's when he saw her, a young woman, barely more than a girl herself, collapsed against a frozen wall, clutching something to her chest. Something impossibly small. Something that was not moving. Subscribe to this channel right now. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Stay until the end. You'll understand why. The woman on the corner had stopped praying 20 minutes ago. Not because she'd given up on God. Maria Santos had not given up on God. Not completely. Not yet. She'd stopped praying because her lips had gone numb. Because the words kept dissolving before they could form. Because every breath she drew in felt like swallowing glass, and she needed every fragment of energy she had left for the one thing that still mattered: keeping David alive. 3 weeks and 2 days old, 7 pounds, 4 ounces at birth. The most beautiful thing Maria had ever seen or touched or been responsible for in her 22 years on this earth. And right now, pressed against her chest inside a cocoon of everything she owned: a coat with a broken zipper, a sweater with holes at the elbows, 2 layers of newspaper stuffed between the fabric, like the armor of someone who had run completely out of options. David was not making a sound. He had stopped crying 40 minutes ago. Maria knew enough in the cold, clear, terrible knowledge that only a new mother surviving on instinct understands that silence from a newborn in December was not peace. It was not sleep. It was the sound of a small body redirecting everything it had, every calorie, every molecule of warmth, every last reserve, just to stay on the right side of a line that was getting thinner by the minute. "David," she whispered, pressing her lips against the top of his head. The skin there was cool. Too cool. "David, baby, stay with me. Stay with me, okay?" He didn't answer. Of course he didn't answer. He was 3 weeks old, but his breathing shifted the faintest change, a barely perceptible shallowing, and Maria felt it the way you feel a floor give beneath your foot just before it breaks. That was the moment the black SUV slowed down. She didn't look up. She had stopped looking up at cars 4 days ago, somewhere around the same time she had stopped expecting doors to open or phones to be answered, or any of the 10,000 invisible systems that hold a life together to reach down and catch her. The world had made its position on Maria Santos very clear over the last 11 days. She had understood. She had stopped asking. So she kept her eyes down. She kept her arms wrapped around David. She kept whispering his name. Inside the SUV, Vincent Romano was on his phone. He had been on his phone for 23 of the last 30 minutes because there was a situation developing with a warehouse on the south side, and DeMarco was handling it with all the precision of a man operating heavy machinery while blindfolded. And if Vincent didn't walk him through every single step personally by morning, there would be a problem that required a much more difficult kind of solution. Vincent did not like difficult solutions. Difficult solutions were expensive. Difficult solutions left evidence. Vincent Romano had spent 3 decades building an organization that did not leave evidence, and he was not about to let DeMarco's incompetence undo 30 years of disciplined work on the night before Christmas Eve. "No," he said into the phone very quietly. The quiet voice. The one that Tony and Russo and every man who had ever worked for Vincent Romano had learned to fear more than shouting. "Not the East Dock. The East Dock has cameras now. I told you this. I told you this in October. Are we having a problem with your memory, DeMarco? Or are we having a problem with your listening?" Sophia was looking out the window. She had been quiet for most of the drive. She did that sometimes after her school performances. Not sad quiet, but processing quiet. The kind of silence that meant she was replaying something inside her head, turning it over, examining it from different angles. She had been the angel in the Christmas pageant tonight. She had one line. She had delivered it with a solemnity that had made 3 different parents in the audience start crying, which Vincent had noted with a complicated mixture of pride and something he preferred not to examine too closely. Elena would have been in the front row. He pushed the thought away. He was getting good at that. "DeMarco," he said, "listen to me very carefully." "Daddy." He paused, not because the word was loud, it wasn't. Sophia almost never raised her voice. He paused because of the texture of it. the absolute loaded stillness underneath it, like a sentence that was not finished yet. "Hold on," he said into the phone. He turned to look at his daughter. Sophia was pressed against the window with both palms flat on the glass and her forehead almost touching it, staring at something on the corner with an intensity he had never seen on her face before. Not the vague, soft sadness of a child watching something upsetting from a safe distance. This was different. This was the face of someone who had seen something they could not look away from, could not categorize, could not file under anything that made it manageable. "Her baby isn't moving," Sophia said. Vincent looked. He saw the woman. He processed her the way he processed everything on a Chicago street at night, instantly, categorically, with the trained eye of a man who had spent his life calculating threat and non-threat in the space of a breath. Young woman, homeless, huddled against the wall, non-threat. He was already turning back to his phone. Then Sophia said it again. "Daddy, her baby isn't moving." And this time the weight of those words, the specific surgical precision of "isn't moving" instead of "is cold" or "is sent" or any of the hundred softer things a child might have said, landed in Vincent's chest like something with an edge to it. He looked again, harder, and this time he saw the shape, the bundle inside the coat. The curve of an arm wrapped around something that barely registered as a size that human beings came in. "Tony," he said, "stop the car." "Boss, we're already running late and, Tony," the quiet voice again, "stop the car." Tony stopped the car. Vincent was out before Sophia. He told her to stay inside. It was a complete waste of breath. She was on the sidewalk before he finished the sentence, her red Christmas dress catching the wind, her patent leather shoes clicking against the frozen concrete, moving toward the woman on the corner, with a certainty of direction that struck Vincent not for the first time and with a feeling he had no good word for as something that had not come from him. "Hi," Sophia said. Maria Santos looked up. She had been looked at in many ways over the past 11 days. Looked through, looked past, looked at with pity that was really discomfort in a more comfortable outfit. She had been looked at by the shelter intake coordinator who told her there were no beds, with the flat apologetic efficiency of someone delivering a weather report. She had been looked at by her cousin Dolores on a video call right before Dolores said "I can't" with eyes that were genuinely sorry and genuinely going to hang up anyway. She had not been looked at by a child standing directly in front of her in a red dress making full eye contact, waiting. "Hi," Maria said because she didn't know what else to say. "I'm Sophia." The girl said it the way children introduce themselves, without preamble, without context, without any apparent awareness that the situation might call for caution. "What's wrong with your baby?" Maria's throat closed. 3 simple words. What's wrong? Not "are you okay?" the question people ask when they don't want to know the answer. Not the practiced non-question of someone already backing away. Just what's wrong, direct, real. Treating her like someone who had an answer worth receiving. Maria hadn't been treated like that in longer than she could accurately remember. I think he's very cold," she said, her voice arriving in pieces cracked in the places where it had been frozen and hadn't quite thawed all the way. "He stopped crying a little while ago. I've been trying to keep him warm, but I don't—" She stopped, looked down at David. "I don't have anywhere to take him." Sophia turned around and looked at her father. Vincent was 3 feet behind her, hands in his pockets, face unreadable in that particular way of his that the men who work for him had learned to interpret as "he's making a decision and you should not speak." He was looking at Maria, not through her, at her. The same focused, assessing look he brought to every situation that required him to understand exactly what he was dealing with before he moved. His eyes went to the bundle against her chest. Something shifted in his face, barely perceptible. The kind of shift that only 2 people in the world would have been able to read: Tony, who had worked for him for 14 years, and Sophia, who had known his face since she first opened her eyes. "Daddy," Sophia said, "we have to help them." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a plea. It had none of the rising urgency or emotional pressure that children typically deploy when they want something badly. It was a statement of fact, simple, flat, delivered with the absolute moral certainty of someone who has not yet learned to negotiate with their own conscience. Vincent looked at his daughter. He thought briefly unwillingly with the force of something that had been locked in a room for 4 years and had been quietly picking the lock ever since, of Elena standing in a hospital corridor holding Sophia, for the first time looking down at their daughter's face with an expression he had never been able to describe to anyone because no language he had ever learned had a word for it. He looked back at Maria Santos. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maria." Her voice was steadier now, just barely. "Maria Santos." "How old?" "I'm 22. "The baby?" "Oh," she swallowed. 3 weeks. 3 weeks and 2 days. Vincent took a slow breath. Cold air in, cold air out. "When did he last eat?" The question hit Maria somewhere unexpected. Not because it was invasive, because it was specific. Because it was the question of someone who was already calculating next steps, not someone performing concern before walking away. "A few hours ago," she said. "He didn't take much." She hesitated. "He's been getting quieter." "Quieter how?" Her voice broke just slightly and she pressed her mouth together hard before she answered. "He cried less yesterday than the day before. And today less than yesterday. And tonight he stopped. She looked down at David. "He just stopped." Vincent looked at Tony, who was still behind the wheel. "Call Russo. I need the second car on this corner in 3 minutes." Tony's reflection in the rearview mirror looked like a man carefully not saying several things. "Boss, if we go to a hospital, there's going to be 3 minutes, Tony." Then Vincent Romano did something that if any of the 12 men who worked directly under him had witnessed, it would have required him to significantly reconsider the operating mythology of fear he had spent 3 decades constructing. He took off his coat, the black cashmere overcoat, the one he'd had made by a tailor on Wabash who charged more per hour than most people in this city made in a week. He stepped forward and he placed it around Maria's shoulders, around her and David together, pulling it closed over them both, tucking the edges in with a deliberateness that was almost careful, almost not gentle. Vincent Romano was not going to stand on a Chicago street corner at 10 o'clock on December 23rd and be gentle, but something in the same neighborhood. Maria flinched when he stepped toward her. Instinctive, involuntary. The full-body calibration of someone who had learned the hard way that things moving fast in your direction usually had a cost. Then the weight of the coat settled over her, and the warmth that was still trapped in the fabric body, warmth, real human warmth, the kind that costs something to give, hit her skin. And Maria Santos, who had held herself together through 11 days of closed doors and turned backs and silent phones, and a cousin who was sorry but was still going to hang up Maria, who had not cried once in 11 days because she was too busy surviving to afford it, felt something give way behind her sternum. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, total surrender, the way a building doesn't collapse all at once but settles gradually, inevitably, into what it was always going to become. Her eyes filled. She pressed her lips together. She held David tighter. "Can you stand?" Vincent asked. "Yes." She stood on the second try. Sophia stepped forward and took Maria's hand. Maria looked down. Small fingers. Red nail polish, slightly chipped. A tiny silver bracelet with a star charm. The grip of a child who gives contact freely without condition, without the careful negotiation that adults wrap around every gesture of connection. "It's okay," Sophia said. She looked up at Maria with steady, serious eyes. "My daddy fixes things." Vincent, 2 steps behind them, heard this. Something moved through him, complicated, fast gone before he could name it. The second car pulled to the curb. Russo at the wheel. No questions. Russo was good at no questions. Vincent opened the door. "Get in, we're going to Northwestern Memorial." Maria looked at him for a long moment before she moved. He recognized the look. He had seen it across tables in rooms in circumstances considerably more adversarial than this. It was the look of someone doing rapid threat assessment, someone who had been hurt enough times to check the hand before taking it. "Why?" she asked. In Vincent Romano's world, people did not ask him why. They thanked him for whatever he offered, and they did not ask questions that implied they were considering saying no. It was one of the fundamental rules of the world he had built. Not a written rule. More like gravity, it simply was. He stood in the cold on the corner of Wacker in Michigan and thought about his answer for 2 full seconds. "Because my daughter asked me to," he said. The truth. The whole of it. Nothing more and nothing less. Maria looked at Sophia. Sophia looked back at her patient, steady, still holding her hand. Maria nodded, got in the car. The drive to Northwestern Memorial Hospital took 11 minutes. 11 minutes in which no one spoke except Sophia once, who leaned slightly toward Maria and said very quietly, "He's going to be okay." "I know it." Maria didn't answer. She pressed her mouth to the top of David's head and closed her eyes and said his name. Just his name, over and over, like a rope she was holding. Vincent watched the city through the windshield and said nothing. 3 times on that drive, he thought about DeMarco and the warehouse and the phone call he had not finished. 3 times the thought arrived, and 3 times something displaced it before it could take root. He didn't examine what that something was. He wasn't ready to examine it. They pulled up to the ER entrance at 9:47 p.m. Vincent was out before Russo cut the engine. He pulled the door for Maria. He walked through the automatic doors with the stride of a man who had never once in his adult life waited to be acknowledged, and he looked at the nurse at the intake desk and said, not loud, not aggressive, just completely quietly, certain, "This infant is 3 weeks old and he has been in below freezing temperatures for several hours. I need a doctor at this desk in the next 60 seconds. The nurse looked at him. She was a woman in her 50s who had worked a Chicago ER for 22 years and had developed the particular brand of unshakable composure that such a career requires. She looked at Vincent Romano, the suit, the bearing, the absolute absence of any expectation that she might say no, and she picked up the phone. In 45 seconds, a team came through the double doors. Maria barely registered the transition. One moment she was walking, the next David was being taken from her arms by practiced hands, and voices were calling numbers to each other, and a doctor was asking her questions in a fast, focused voice that left no room for anything except answers. How long since he was warm? Hours. Since this morning, maybe before a moment. Has he been responsive, eye movement, any vocalization? He was crying earlier. He stopped about an hour. Okay, we have him. Stay right here. They went through the double doors. The doors swung shut behind them, and Maria stood in the empty space where David had been. Her arms still curved in the shape of holding him, and she did not move. Could not move. The absence of his weight against her chest was the most frightening thing she had felt all night. More frightening than the cold. More frightening than the silence. More frightening than any of the 11 days that had led here, because this emptiness was new. This emptiness had no instructions. Sophia walked to her side, took her hand, said nothing. Across the waiting room, Vincent Romano stood with his back against the wall and his arms crossed, and his face doing the careful, controlled thing it did when something was happening inside him that he had not authorized. A nurse approached with a clipboard. He gave her information. He handed her a card. She looked at it, looked at his name, and a series of thoughts crossed her face that she was professional enough to keep contained. She nodded, walked away. Cards with Vincent Romano's name on them did not require explanations. The waiting room was too bright and too warm. The TV on the wall played a cooking show on mute. The plastic chairs were bolted to the floor in neat, indifferent rows. Sophia sat down. Maria sat beside her, forward on the edge of the seat, not leaning back, still coiled, still not entirely certain she was somewhere she was allowed to stay. Vincent stood. He paced. 4 steps. 4 steps back. "Daddy," Sophia said. He stopped. "Come sit down." He looked at her. His daughter. 7 years old in a Christmas dress in an emergency waiting room at 10 o'clock at night, with the unassailable calm of someone who had decided the situation was manageable and was now simply waiting for the facts to confirm it. He sat down. Sophia put her hand on top of his. He turned his palm up and wrapped his fingers around hers, and the 3 of them, the feared man and his daughter, and the woman with empty arms, sat together in the too bright light and waited. The clock on the wall read 10:22 p.m. when the double doors opened and the doctor walked back through. The doctor was a woman in her early 40s with short dark hair and the particular kind of face that emergency medicine produces over time, composed by default, readable only if you knew what to look for. She walked through the double doors with a measured pace that was not slow enough to be casual and not fast enough to be alarmed. Maria was on her feet before the doors had finished swinging. "Is he okay?" The words came out of her before she could shape them into anything more controlled. Raw, cracked open. "Please, is David okay?" The doctor put a hand on Maria's arm. not perfunctory, deliberate, the touch of someone who understood that the next 10 seconds were going to matter for a very long time. "Your son is stable," she said. Maria's knees went. Not all the way. She caught herself, one hand finding the back of the chair, holding on. But the collapse was real and it was total, and it was the kind of collapse that only happens when a person has been holding something unbearable up for so long that the moment the weight lifts, the body simply doesn't remember how to stand on its own anymore. "Oh God," Maria breathed. "Oh God, thank you." "He's not out of the woods yet," the doctor said, and her voice was careful, measured, threading the line between honest and crushing. "His core temperature was significantly below normal when he came in. We have him on a warming protocol right now. His heart rate is responding well, and his oxygen levels are coming up. Those are good signs, very good signs." She paused. "But I want to be direct with you. If he had stayed outside for another hour, maybe less, we would be having a very different conversation." The waiting room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the absence of sound. Maria stood with her hand on the back of the chair and absorbed what the doctor had just said. Another hour, maybe less. She had been on that corner. She had been watching David go still. She had been running out of things to do and out of places to go and out of words to whisper, and she had been, without fully allowing herself to know it, beginning to understand that she was watching her son die in her arms and there was nothing left she could do about it. Another hour. "Can I see him?" Maria asked. Her voice had gone very quiet. "In a few minutes. We're getting him stabilized, and I want to check his blood work before we move him." The doctor glanced briefly at Vincent, a quick professional assessment, then back to Maria. "Is there family we can contact his father or—" "No," Maria said, fast, flat, a door closing. "There's no one." The doctor nodded, no follow-up. She'd heard that particular tone enough times to recognize where it ended. "Okay, I'll come get you as soon as he's ready." She looked at Sophia, who was standing beside Maria with the patient, watchful stillness of a child who has decided her job in this moment is to simply be present. Something shifted in the doctor's expression, briefly, privately warm. "You did good tonight," she said to Sophia. Sophia looked up at her seriously. "Is he going to need to come back to the hospital?" "We're going to make sure he gets everything he needs," the doctor said. Then she went back through the double doors. The room rearranged itself. Maria sat back down heavily. Sophia sat beside her. Vincent stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the two of them and felt something working through his chest that he could not metabolize fast enough to keep it from showing on his face, so he turned and walked to the window instead. The city was out there. His city. The one he had spent 30 years navigating, manipulating, controlling, with a precision that most people in his position never achieved. The skyline was lit up against the black sky, cold and indifferent, and exactly as it always was. Nothing out there had changed, not one single thing. It was the inside of this room that had changed. He couldn't have told you exactly when it happened. Whether it was Sophia's hands on the glass, or Maria's flinch when he stepped toward her, or the particular way David's silence had registered in his body before his brain had caught up with what it meant. He couldn't have told you. But something in him had shifted tonight in a direction he wasn't sure he had the vocabulary to name, and he was standing at this window trying to decide what to do with that information. His phone buzzed. DeMarco, the warehouse. The Southside situation that was still waiting for him, still unresolved, still requiring the particular kind of attention that only Vincent Romano could provide. The Vincent Romano who had been in that car 40 minutes ago, irritated and efficient and completely perfectly sealed against anything the street had to offer. He declined the call. Behind him, he heard Maria say very quietly, "I don't know how to thank you." He didn't turn around immediately. He let the words sit. Then he turned. Maria was looking at him with an expression he had seen before in different contexts, in different rooms, with different stakes. The look of someone who is genuinely uncertain what they owe and terrified of the answer. He recognized it because he had in the past cultivated that uncertainty in people deliberately. It was a useful thing in his world for people to feel that they owed you something they couldn't calculate. He didn't like seeing it on her face. "You don't owe me anything," he said. She blinked, like she'd expected a different answer, like she'd been braced for one. "I mean it," he said, and his own voice surprised him slightly, less clipped than usual, less armored. "My daughter wanted to stop. I stopped. That's all. Maria looked at Sophia. Sophia was watching her father with an expression that was entirely too knowing for a 7-year-old, and the corner of her mouth was doing something that in an adult would have been called a suppressed smile. That's not all, Sophia said. Sophia, you gave her your coat, Daddy. The silence that followed this observation had a texture to it. Vincent looked at his daughter. Sophia looked back at him, unintimidated, a quality she had possessed from approximately the age of 18 months and had never once lost. Maria made a sound, small, involuntary. It took Vincent a moment to realize it was a laugh, exhausted, fractured, the kind that lives right next door to sobbing and can go either way at any moment. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders shook once. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm. Don't apologize, Vincent said. He said it quickly, more quickly than he intended. She looked at him. He looked back at her. A pause in which something was acknowledged without being named. Then a different nurse appeared at the edge of the waiting room, younger with a ponytail, carrying a tray with a bowl of soup and crackers and a cup of hot tea, and set it on the table beside Maria with the slightly self-conscious care of someone doing the thing they had been asked to do by a man they found a bit alarming and were glad to have done. Maria stared at the tray, then at Vincent. You said you hadn't eaten since Friday, he said. It's Sunday. She stared at the soup. Her throat moved. She picked up the spoon, put it down, picked it up again, and then she ate, and the way she ate, the single-minded, careful focus of someone consuming something that their body was receiving, like a language it had almost forgotten, told Vincent more about the last 11 days of her life than anything she had said or could have said. Sophia leaned over to him and said under her breath, "She was really hungry, Daddy." "I know," he said. "We should." Sophia stopped herself, reconsidered, started again. "Can she sleep somewhere warm tonight?" Vincent looked at his daughter, 7 years old, sitting in a hospital waiting room in a Christmas dress at 10:30 at night, problem-solving with the calm, practical focus of someone who had already decided what the right answer was and was now simply waiting for the adults to catch up. "We'll figure that out," he said. "That means yes," Sophia told Maria, who had looked up from her soup. Sophia sighed, "That means we'll figure it out." "It means yes," Sophia said with complete serenity. She folded her hands in her lap. Maria looked between them. Something moved across her face, complicated and layered and lit from underneath by something that might cautiously have been the earliest possible version of relief. She looked down at the soup. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Vincent said. For the third time tonight, he heard his own voice doing something it did not normally do. Something quieter. Something that wasn't managing a situation, wasn't calculating an outcome, wasn't the voice of a man keeping every variable in sight. He wasn't sure he recognized it. He wasn't sure it alarmed him. "Eat your soup." Maria ate her soup. 40 minutes passed. Vincent sat. He did not pace. He did not take calls. His phone buzzed 4 more times in those 40 minutes, and he looked at the screen each time and put it back in his pocket. Russo sent a text asking about the timeline. Vincent sent back, waiting. Tony sent a different text, careful and oblique, asking if everything was all right. Vincent did not respond. Sophia fell asleep. It happened the way children fall asleep without warning, without transition between one second and the next. She was sitting upright with her hands folded, and then she was leaning against Vincent's arm with her eyes closed and her breathing slow and even, her Christmas dress spread around her like a small, crumpled flag. Vincent shifted to accommodate her without waking her. He put his arm around her. He did it automatically without thinking about it, and then sat very still. Maria watched this. She watched Vincent Romano, this man she had known for less than 2 hours, this man whose coat was still around her shoulders, whose name she still didn't know, whose world she understood nothing about, sit with his unconscious daughter leaning against his chest and become, for just a moment, completely legible. Not the suit, not the authority, not the flat, assessing eyes and the voice that did not expect to be questioned. Just a man with a sleeping child against his arms, sitting up a little straighter to make sure she didn't slide. "Orasha." "She's incredible," Maria said quietly, so as not to wake her. Vincent looked down at Sophia. The look on his face lasted only a moment before it rearranged itself back into something more controlled. But Maria had seen it, and she did not look away fast enough. "She is," he said. "She walked straight up to me," Maria said. No hesitation. She just walked up and looked at me like it was the most normal thing in the world. She paused. Nobody's done that in a long time. Vincent looked at her. How long have you been on the street? 11 days. The number landed with a weight that seemed to surprise even Vincent. 11 days with a newborn. The landlord locked me out. She said it flatly, not for sympathy, just as a fact delivered with the particular exhaustion of someone who has explained it too many times and is tired of watching people's faces do the thing they do. I was 3 weeks late on rent. I'd been working until I was 8 months along. Then the restaurant closed. I had savings, but they ran out, and it just happened fast. She shook her head. It always happens fast, I think. 1 week you're behind, 2 weeks you're behind, then one day there's a new lock and your bags are in the hall. And the door again. Quick, flat. Not in the picture. Vincent nodded once, accepting the boundary. Family. My cousin. She couldn't. A pause. Or she could, but she didn't, which is the same thing in the end. Yes, Vincent said, it is. Something in the way he said it made Maria look at him more carefully. There was an understanding in his voice that wasn't generic, not the sympathetic agreement of someone performing empathy. Something older, something that knew from the inside what it was to reach for a hand and find empty air. She wanted to ask, she didn't ask. Some doors you don't open at 10:45 in a hospital waiting room when you're eating soup that someone gave you out of a kindness you still don't entirely understand. What's your name? She asked instead. I still don't know your name. A beat. Something moved behind his eyes. Vincent. Vincent, she repeated. Thank you, Vincent. He said nothing. He looked down at Sophia's sleeping face. The muscle in his jaw moved once. The double doors opened at 11:03 p.m. The pediatric nurse came through first smiling, and not the measured, careful smile of someone managing expectations, but a real one with teeth, the kind that only shows up when the news is genuinely good. Maria was on her feet before the nurse had crossed half the distance between them. He's asking for you, the nurse said. Maria blinked. He's 3 weeks old. He can't. He's crying, the nurse said, which is the best possible thing he can be doing right now. She laughed a little. He is very vocal about wanting his mother. Come on. Maria turned. She looked at Vincent, then at Sophia, still asleep, still curled against her father's arm, her breathing deep and untroubled. She looked at Vincent. Go, he said quietly. Maria followed the nurse through the double doors. Vincent sat in the silence she left behind. Sophia was warm against his side. The cooking show on the mute television was now showing someone folding dough. The fluorescent lights were doing what fluorescent lights do at 11 o'clock at night, which is illuminate everything with the particular honesty of light that has no interest in being kind about it. He thought about Maria on that corner. He thought about the way she had flinched when he stepped toward her and then stood up on the second try and let his daughter take her hand. He thought about 11 days and a newborn and bags in a hallway and a cousin who had said, I can't. He thought about how close it had been, how close he had been to telling Tony to keep driving, how automatic it had been that first word keep going before Sophia's voice had cut through everything. Her baby isn't moving. He reached for his phone. Not to call DeMarco. He opened his contacts and scrolled to a woman named Karen Halsey, who ran a foundation that dealt in, among other things, emergency housing placement in the greater Chicago area. Vincent had donated to her foundation 3 times, not for philanthropic reasons or not primarily. In his world, foundations were useful things to have relationships with. Karen had his number and she owed him a conversation. It was 11 o'clock on a Sunday night before Christmas Eve. He called her anyway. She answered on the second ring because people who had Vincent Romano's personal number understood that calls from it did not happen at convenient hours and declining them was not a genuine option. Vincent, cautious, alert, immediately and completely awake. What can I do for you? I need a housing placement, he said. A young woman, 22, with a 3-week-old infant. They've been on the street for 11 days. I need something clean, safe, and available by tomorrow morning. A pause. Vincent, the waiting list for emergency housing in Chicago are... Karen, a shorter pause. I'll make calls tonight. Good. I'll need it to include basic supplies. Formula if she needs it. Diapers, clothing for both of them. Whatever the baby needs for the first month. That can be arranged. And I'll want someone to follow up on her, not once, regularly, someone who can connect her with job placement, childcare assistance, whatever the path forward looks like. Not charity, an actual path, he paused. She's capable. She just ran out of floor. Karen Halsey was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice had a quality it hadn't had at the start of the call. Can I ask what happened? My daughter stopped the car, Vincent said. He hung up. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked down at Sophia, still asleep, still utterly unbothered by everything the night had required of her. You have no idea what you started, he said to her very quietly. She slept on. Her silver bracelet caught the light. He was still sitting like that, daughter against his side phone in his pocket, the particular stillness of a man who has made a decision he is not going to unmake when the double doors opened again and Maria came back through. She was different, not dramatically, not in any way you could point to in a photograph, but different in the way a person is different when the worst possible thing has been prevented. Like something had restarted, like a dial that had been turned all the way down was back up to a level that could sustain life. She was holding David. He was wrapped in a hospital blanket, the kind with the pink and blue stripes, an object so specifically and completely of that place that it almost looked like a prop. His eyes were open, dark and unfocused in the way of newborns, moving vaguely in the direction of his mother's face with the whole body concentration of someone still learning what faces are. He was making a small, intermittent sound, not crying, something between a sound and a question. Maria was crying. She was doing it quietly, the way she'd done everything quietly tonight, with her mouth pressed for and her eyes bright and her face turned slightly down toward David's, like she could hide it in the angle. She wasn't hiding it. She walked to the chair beside Vincent and sat down slowly, carefully, with the exaggerated care of someone handling something irreplaceable. He's okay, she said. Her voice was wrecked in the best possible way, not broken but open, like something that had been closed for a very long time had been left ajar. The doctor says he's going to be completely okay. His temperature is almost normal. She says if he stays warm and feeds well tonight, she doesn't anticipate any lasting. She stopped, pressed her lips together hard, started again. He's okay. Good, Vincent said, and meant it with a completeness that surprised him. Maria looked down at David. Then she did something that Vincent did not expect. She turned toward him, and with a careful, deliberate movement, she shifted David in her arms so that his face was angled towards Sophia, still asleep, still warm against her father's side, and she said quietly, "This is the little girl who saved your life, baby. I want you to know that. I want you to remember." He was 3 weeks old. He couldn't remember. He would never consciously recall any of this night. But Maria said it anyway because some things need to be said out loud even when no one who hears them is old enough to understand. Vincent looked at David's face, looked at Sophia's sleeping one, and the thing that had been moving through his chest all night, slow tectonic without a name, settled into something. Not peace exactly. He wasn't a man who dealt in peace, but something in the same territory. Something he thought he had permanently decommissioned 4 years ago, standing at a graveside in the rain without a single tear, and had apparently been wrong about. "Vincent," Maria said. He looked at her. "The doctor asked me about tonight, about where I was going after discharge." She held his gaze with the direct, undefended look of someone who has nothing left to protect and has made a kind of freedom out of that fact. "I don't have an answer. I don't have anywhere." "I made a call," he said. She waited. "There's a woman named Karen Halsey. She runs a housing foundation. She's making calls tonight. You'll have somewhere to go by tomorrow morning. Somewhere real, not a shelter, an apartment." He said it the way he said most things, quietly, finally, with the cadence of a sentence that is not leaving room for a counteroffer. "It'll come with what you and David need for the first month, and someone will follow up with you about work, about childcare, about whatever comes next." Maria stared at him. Vincent, I can't." "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a starting point. What you do with it is yours." A beat. That's what I was told once, by someone who gave me a starting point when I had nothing. He said the last part carefully, like he was picking up something he hadn't handled in a long time and wasn't certain of the weight. It's how it works when it works. The silence that followed was long enough to be real. Who told you that? Maria asked. He looked at the window. At the city, at his own reflection, faint overlaid on the lights outside. My father, he said, long time ago. Maria looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at David, who had curled his tiny fingers around the edge of her thumb and was holding on with that absolute unreasonable grip that newborns have. The grip that evolution built long before babies knew what grip meant, because letting go was not a survival strategy. Okay, she said, just that. Okay, not, thank you, not again, not right now, just the word that means I'm here, I'm in. I'm not going to argue with the one good thing that has happened in 11 days. Okay, Vincent said back. Sophia stirred against his arm, not waking yet, but shifting her brow, furrowing slightly, the way it did when she was in the shallow end of sleep. She made a small sound. Her hand, in her sleep, found her father's sleeve and gripped it. He did not move. He sat in that plastic chair, in that too-bright waiting room, his daughter asleep against him, and a woman he had not known 2 hours ago sitting beside him, with a 3-week-old son who was alive because a child in a red dress had pressed her palms against a car window and said his name, said her baby isn't moving, and Vincent Romano had, for reasons he was only beginning to understand, stopped the car. At 11:41 p.m., the doctor came back through the double doors. She looked at the three of them, at the man and the sleeping child, and the young woman with the baby, and something crossed her face that she made no attempt to conceal. We'd like to keep David for observation overnight, she said to Maria. Standard protocol for hypothermia cases in infants. But I want you to hear me clearly. She looked at Maria steadily. He is going to be fine. You got him here in time. That matters enormously. She paused. We have a family room down the hall. You can stay with him tonight. There's a bed. Maria exhaled. Yes, yes, please. The doctor looked at Vincent. Mr. Romano. She said it without inflection, but with the precise, careful neutrality of someone who knows a name and is not going to elaborate on that knowledge. You did a good thing tonight. Vincent held her gaze. My daughter did, he said. The doctor nodded, looked once more at Sophia sleeping. Then she went back through the doors. Maria stood. She held David carefully, one hand behind his head, the automatic architecture of a mother's grip, the muscle memory of 3 weeks that felt like 3 years. She stood in front of Vincent, who had risen when she did, and she looked up at him, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then Sophia opened her eyes, not slowly. All at once, the way she always woke, instantly present, immediately oriented, as though she had simply been somewhere else and now chosen to return. She looked at David first, then at Maria, then at her father. Is he okay? She asked. No disorientation, no preamble, straight to the point as always. He's okay, Maria said. Sophia looked at David's face for a long moment. Then she reached out very carefully and placed 2 fingers against his wrapped hand. David's fingers closed around them. The same grip, the same ancient, unreasonable refusal to let go. Sophia looked up at Maria. He knows, she said. Maria's breath caught. What? He knows you were there, Sophia said, with the complete unquestioning confidence of a child delivering a fact she has never doubted. Even when they're this small, they know. Vincent watched his daughter's face. He thought about a hospital room 4 years ago, and a woman who had not made it home, and a 3-year-old who had sat in a waiting room in a different city, in a different season, and held his hand and not cried because he wasn't crying, and she had always followed his lead. He thought about how long he had been the one deciding what to feel and when to feel it, and whether that decision had served either of them the way he had told himself it had. He did not say any of this, but something in his face and the particular way it had learned to go quiet when something mattered, told the story in a language Maria Santos, who had spent 11 days reading the smallest human signals, just to survive, understood perfectly. She put her free hand briefly on his arm. Just for a second. Just the weight of it. Then she followed the nurse through the double doors. Vincent stood where she had left him. The doors swung shut. The waiting room was quiet. Sophia was beside him. David's warmth still on her fingertips, watching her father with those brown eyes that knew how to end arguments without raising a voice. Daddy, she said. Yeah. Are we going to see them again? He looked at the doors, at his daughter, at the city through the window, at the reflection of the two of them there and not there overlaid on everything outside. Yeah, he said, we are. Sophia nodded as though this confirmed something she had already known. She slipped her hand into his. And Vincent Romano, who had spent 30 years making sure that nothing in this world could reach him, stood in a hospital waiting room on the night before Christmas Eve and held his daughter's hand and felt the thing he had sealed away shift again further this time, deeper like a door he had locked long ago, opening one careful inch at a time. They left the hospital at 12:23 a.m. Not because there was nothing left to do. There was plenty left to do, and Vincent's phone had made that abundantly clear over the last hour, but because Sophia had fallen back asleep in the plastic chair, and the night had already asked more of her than any Christmas Eve rehearsal was supposed to require. And carrying her to the car was the one decision Vincent made all night that required no deliberation whatsoever. He told the nurse at the desk to put his number on David's file. She looked at him with the same careful, neutral expression the doctor had used, the one that said, I know who you are, and I am going to be very professional about knowing that, and she wrote the number down without being asked twice. He told Maria through the family room door that Karen Halsey would call her before 9 in the morning, that she should answer, that everything would be arranged. Maria had opened the door just wide enough to hear him David against her chest, her face soft with exhaustion, and something else, something more complicated, something that was still working out what it was. She had nodded. She had looked like she wanted to say something and couldn't find the right container for it. Sleep, Vincent said. We'll talk tomorrow. We'll talk tomorrow. He was in the elevator before he registered what he'd said. The ease of it, the way it had come out like a continuation of something already established, like a sentence in the middle of a paragraph rather than a closing one. He stood in the elevator with Sophia heavy and warm in his arms and looked at the number panel and did not examine the sentence too closely. Russo drove them home through streets that were quiet in the particular way of a city that has agreed temporarily to set down its noise. Sophia didn't wake. She slept against his shoulder the whole way, one hand loosely gripping his lapel, her breathing the slow, absolute breathing of a child with no unresolved business. Vincent watched the city go past and thought about a corner on Wacker in Michigan and a woman who had stopped praying because her lips had gone numb. He put Sophia to bed at 1 o'clock. She stirred when he laid her down just barely and her eyes opened halfway. Daddy, right here. Is Maria okay? She's okay. David's okay. They're at the hospital warm and safe. A long pause, the eyes drifting. We're going to see them tomorrow. Yes. Promise. He tucked the blanket around her. He looked at her face, the face that was in this half-light, so completely Elena's, that it was sometimes still a physical thing, a force that hit somewhere between the ribs. He had gotten very good at managing it. He was not managing it particularly well tonight. Promise, he said. She was asleep again before the word finished landing. He sat on the edge of her bed for longer than he had sat on the edge of her bed in a very long time, not thinking about the warehouse on the south side, not thinking about DeMarco or Russo or any of the 10,000 moving pieces of the world he had built and was responsible for maintaining. Just sitting in the dark with his daughter's breathing the only sound and something in his chest doing the slow, quiet work that things do when they have been ignored long enough and have finally found an opening. He picked up his phone, not for DeMarco. He opened the contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in 14 months, Father Benedetto, the priest at St. Michael's on the near north side, the one Elena had gone to, the one who had done her funeral mass, the one who had called Vincent twice in the year after and received no answer and apparently had the patience of someone who understood that certain kinds of grief operated on their own timeline and could not be rushed or managed into resolution. He didn't call. He looked at the name. He put the phone down. He was not ready for that conversation. But the fact that he had scrolled to it, that his thumb had found it without entirely intending to, was itself a kind of information. He went to his own room and did not sleep for a long time. Karen Halsey called at 8:47 the next morning, which was Christmas Eve, which felt to Vincent like the universe making a point with more drama than was strictly necessary. He was on his second coffee, standing at the kitchen counter, while Mrs. Santos Alvarez, who had worked for him for 9 years and treated the distinction between housekeeper and household manager with appropriate flexibility, made breakfast, and told him without being asked that Miss Sophia had already been awake for 45 minutes and had eaten a bowl of cereal and was asking about going to see the baby. "Karen," he said, "it's done." She sounded pleased with herself, which she had earned. "There's an apartment in Lincoln Park furnished owned by a family that has been working with us for 3 years. They had a vacancy opening January 1st, but they agreed to move it up. Maria Santos can have keys by noon today." A pause. "It's a good apartment, Vincent. Clean, safe building near the Red Line. Her neighbors are a retired teacher and a couple with a toddler. It's a real place." "What about supplies?" "I have a team meeting there this morning with the basics food diapers formula in case she needs it clothing for both of them. A few things for the baby's room." Another pause, smaller this time. "I might have gone slightly beyond the request." "Good," he said. "There's also a caseworker named Diana Chen who works with our organization. She specializes in young mothers getting back into the workforce. She's available to meet with Maria the first week of January. She's the best we have." "Make the appointment." "Already did." Karen let a beat pass. "Vincent." "Yeah." "What happened last night?" He looked out the window, the city in the morning. Cold light, hard sky. "My daughter stopped the car," he said. The same answer he'd given last night, because it was still the whole truth. Karen Halsey, who had known Vincent Romano for 6 years and had learned to read his silences better than most people read sentences, said, "Tell Sophia she did well." He hung up. He looked at Mrs. Alvarez, who was watching him with an expression she usually had the professional courtesy to conceal. Today she wasn't bothering. "What?" he said. "Nothing." She turned back to the stove. "Nothing at all, Mr. Romano." "Mrs. Alvarez, I'm just cooking eggs." "You're not just cooking eggs, you have a look." She turned around and pointed a spatula at him with the unintimidated directness of a woman who had cleaned his house for 9 years and was not afraid of him in the least, which he had long since accepted as both an inconvenience and a comfort. "I have been working for you since Miss Sophia was 3 years old. I have never once seen you make a phone call like that before breakfast." She turned back to the stove. "That's all I'm saying." Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway at that exact moment, already dressed, wearing the red sweater with the small reindeer on it that she had selected herself and that Vincent had, against his instincts, allowed her to purchase. She was carrying her silver bracelet in one hand, turning it around her fingers the way she did when she was thinking hard about something. "Can we go now?" she asked. "After breakfast," Vincent said. "I already ate." "After I have breakfast?" She pulled out a chair and sat down across from him with her hands folded on the table in the patient, slightly theatrical posture of someone demonstrating that they are waiting without complaint and would like that to be noted. Mrs. Alvarez set a plate in front of Vincent. She set a second plate in front of Sophia, despite the earlier cereal, without being asked. Sophia ate it without argument, which was its own form of communication. They were in the car by 10 o'clock. Russo driving. Sophia, in the back seat beside Vincent, turned slightly toward him, animated in a way that she usually reserved for things like the first snow of the season, and finding out that a book she loved was going to have a sequel. "Does she know we're coming?" Sophia asked. "She knows," Vincent said. "Karen's team will have called ahead." "What's the apartment like?" "I haven't seen it." "Is it nice?" "Karen says it's nice." "Does it have a window?" "David needs sunlight." "The doctor last night told Maria that babies need sunlight in the morning. Did you hear that?" "She told her that when I was in the—" Sophia stopped. "I wasn't supposed to be in the hallway when the doctor was talking. But I was very quiet." Vincent looked at his daughter. "Of course you were. It's important information, Daddy." "It is," he agreed. "So does it have a window?" "Sophia, I've never been to the apartment. You could call Karen back." He took out his phone and sent Karen a text. "Does the Lincoln Park unit have adequate sun exposure?" He showed it to Sophia. She read it and gave a single satisfied nod. The hospital first. That had been the plan. Go to the hospital, make sure the discharge was going smoothly, walk Maria and David out. Simple, manageable. The kind of thing that had a defined beginning and end and did not require him to examine what it meant that he was doing it. The plan lasted until they walked into the family room and he saw Maria's face. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with David in her arms, and she had her phone out, and the expression she was wearing was not the exhausted but alive expression of someone who had made it through a hard night. It was something else, something tighter, something that lived in the same neighborhood as the look she'd had on that corner, the look of a person standing outside a closed door with no key. "What happened?" Sophia said immediately. She walked directly to Maria and sat beside her on the bed. "What's wrong?" Maria looked up. She registered Vincent in the doorway. She pressed her mouth together for a moment before she spoke. "Karen Halsey called this morning." "Yes," Vincent said, "about the apartment." "She told me about the apartment." Maria paused. "She also told me what it's worth, the monthly value, the supplies, the caseworker, all of it." She looked down at David. "Vincent, that's thousands of dollars." "Maria, I can't take thousands of dollars from someone I met 12 hours ago." She looked up at him directly. There was no anger in her face, which somehow made it harder than anger would have been. Just the clear, steady look of someone navigating a principle she had decided not to compromise, even when the compromise would make her life considerably easier. "I know how this looks. I know I'm sitting in a hospital with nothing, and you're offering me everything. I know the logical thing is to just say yes and not ask questions." She stopped. "But I need to ask questions." Sophia looked at her father. Vincent stepped into the room. He sat in the chair beside the bed, the visitor's chair, close enough to be a conversation and not an address. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, hands loosely together, and he looked at Maria Santos directly, and without the managed distance he usually kept between himself and every human being in his orbit. "What do you want to know?" he said. Maria's eyes searched his face. "Why are you doing this? I told you last night. You told me Sophia asked you to stop the car." She held his gaze. "That's not why you called a housing foundation at 11 o'clock at night. That's not why there's an apartment waiting with supplies and a caseworker." She shifted David slightly. "That's something else. I want to know what it is." The room was quiet. Sophia was very still beside Maria, watching her father with those eyes that knew him better than he sometimes knew himself. Vincent looked at the window, at his hands, at Maria's face, which was asking him for a truth he had not prepared and had not until this moment fully understood he owed. "My wife died 4 years ago," he said. It landed in the room without warning, without preamble, just a sentence set down like an object. Maria didn't say anything. She waited. Sophia was 3. He kept his voice level, factual, the way he handled things that had masked carefully with both hands not squeezing. "We were at a dinner. Elena went to the restroom. She never came back." He paused. "Aneurysm. She was 34 years old." "Vincent," Maria said quietly, "after she died, I was—" He stopped, started again differently. "There was a woman, she ran a restaurant, small place near our house. Elena had known her for years. The week after the funeral, this woman showed up at my door with food. Not a casserole, not a sympathy gesture. Enough food for 2 weeks. She showed up the next week with more. She found a housekeeper. She arranged Sophia's preschool carpool without being asked. She just managed the things that were falling apart because I didn't know how to manage them, and I was too gone to ask for help." He looked at Maria. "She never made it a transaction. She never said what she was owed or what it meant or what I should do with it. She just did it." He stopped. The room held the silence. "She passed away last spring," he said. "Heart attack. She was 61. I went to her funeral and I stood in the back because there were things I had never said, that I had handled the way I handle everything, which is to receive it, file it, and move forward without accounting for it properly. A beat. I don't want to make that mistake again." Maria looked at him for a long time. David made a small sound against her chest, and she adjusted him absently, her eyes still on Vincent's face. "What was her name?" she asked. "Rosa," he said. "Rosa Carmine." Maria absorbed this. Then, "You're not doing this because I remind you of her." "No," Vincent said. "I'm doing it because my daughter looked through a car window and saw you and I almost kept driving. And I have been thinking about that, about what happens in the version of tonight where I keep driving since the moment we pulled up to this hospital." The silence that came after this was different from the others. Warmer, less provisional. Sophia, who had been sitting with the stillness of someone who understood that what was happening in this room was too important to interrupt, reached over and put her hand on Maria's knee. not asking for anything, just marking the spot, just saying, I'm here. This is real. Maria looked down at Sophia's hand. Something broke open in her face, not apart, but opened the difference between a wound and a window. Her eyes filled, and this time she didn't press her lips together or turn away. She let it come. Okay, she said, her voice barely there. Okay, Vincent. He nodded once, stood up. Oh, the doctor said discharge is at 11. Russo's downstairs. We'll take you to Lincoln Park. Maria wiped her face with the back of her hand. I don't have anything. I left everything on that corner. Whatever I was carrying. Karen's team brought clothes for both of you this morning. They're at the apartment. He paused. There's a bag in the car. Sophia picked some things out this morning. Maria blinked, looked at Sophia. Sophia straightened slightly with the particular dignity of someone receiving acknowledgement for a job they are confident they did well. I picked a sleeper with ducks on it for David, she said. I know it's maybe not a Christmas thing, but I think babies like ducks. They're non-threatening. Maria made the sound again, the laugh that lived next to crying. They are non-threatening, she agreed, her voice breaking on the last syllable in a way that was not sad at all. The discharge took 40 minutes. Forms, instructions, a follow-up appointment card, a nurse who went through the warming and feeding guidelines with Maria twice and gave her a number to call with questions at any hour. Maria listened to everything with the absolute total attention of someone who has learned that information is the only reliable currency. When they wheeled her out hospital policy wheelchair to the door, David in her arms, and the cold air hit, Maria tucked the blanket tighter around him reflexively. He made a sound, not discomfort, something more like acknowledgement, like a person stepping outside and registering the weather. He's complaining, Sophia said happily. That's good, the nurse said. Complaining is excellent. Russo had the car running, warm inside. Maria got in with the careful, deliberate movements of someone who was no longer moving through the world as though she had to be invisible, but hadn't quite finished recalibrating to the idea that she was allowed to take up space. Sophia got in beside her immediately and buckled her seatbelt and looked at David with an expression of focused satisfaction. He has more color today, Sophia announced. He does, Maria agreed. His cheeks were grayish last night. Sophia, Vincent said from the front. They were daddy, I noticed. I know you noticed. You notice everything. Is that bad? He looked at her in the rearview mirror. The corner of his mouth moved. No, he said. It's not bad. The drive to Lincoln Park took 22 minutes. Maria looked out the window for most of it, David in her arms, watching the city go past with the expression of someone re-encountering something familiar from a completely different angle. She had been in Lincoln Park before. She had walked these streets. She had existed in this city for all 22 years of her life. But the city looked different when you weren't trying to make yourself invisible in it. What street? She asked when Russo turned off Clark. Vincent told her. She was quiet for a moment. I used to work near there, she said. The restaurant before it closed. I'd walk past those buildings every day. She paused. I never thought. She stopped. What? Sophia asked. Maria looked down at David. I never thought I'd be on the inside of one. Sophia reached over and found her hand. No words, just the hand. The building was brick, 3 stories with a front door that had a code panel and a directory of names. Karen Halsey was waiting outside with a woman Vincent had not met. Younger, sharp-eyed, with the kinetic efficiency of someone who operates at a speed most people find slightly exhausting. She introduced herself as Diana Chen before Russo had fully cut the engine. Maria Santos, Diana said, stepping forward as Maria got out of the car. I'm with Karen's organization. I'll be working with you starting in the new year. I'm not here to manage you. I'm here to help you build what you want to build. Big difference. She said it with the brisk confidence of someone who had made that distinction many times and meant it every time. But today is not that day. Today I'm just here to show you your apartment. Maria looked at her. You're very direct. Always, Diana said, not apologetically. Is that okay? Yes, Maria said, that's okay. Karen Halsey stepped forward and shook Vincent's hand. She was in her 50s, silver-haired, with the particular brand of warmth that comes from years of doing work that matters. She looked at him with an expression that was affectionate and slightly wondering, the look of someone seeing a side of a person they had always suspected existed and are glad to have confirmed. Mr. Romano, she said. Karen, he said. She glanced at Sophia. And this must be Sophia Romano, Sophia said, extending her hand with the formal seriousness of someone who had been taught handshakes properly and took the responsibility seriously. I'm 7, it's nice to meet you. Karen shook her hand with appropriate gravity. The pleasure is mine, Sophia. They went inside. The apartment was on the second floor. Diana had the key. She opened the door and stepped back, and Maria walked in, first David against her shoulder, and stopped in the middle of the main room and stood there for a moment that had no sound in it. It was furnished. Not elaborately a couch, a coffee table, a small dining set, curtains that let in the winter light. But on the kitchen counter there were grocery bags, and in the corner that was clearly designated as David's space, there was a bassinet and a small dresser and a bag of supplies arranged with someone's obvious care. And on the kitchen table there was a card. Maria walked to the table and picked it up. She read it. Her back was to them, so her face was not visible, but her shoulders told the story. The way they rose and then slowly, deliberately came down. The way her head dropped, just slightly before she straightened again. She turned around. It's from Karen's team, she said. Her voice was steady. It says, welcome home. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Sophia walked to Maria and stood in front of her and looked up with those brown eyes that had since last night become the axis around which this story had turned, and said with complete, uncomplicated conviction, It's your home now. Maria looked at her. Then she did something she had not done for the entire night they had spent together. She crouched down, careful of David, and she put her free arm around Sophia and held on. Sophia held on back arms around Maria's neck, completely at ease in the way of children who give contact freely without keeping score. Vincent stood in the doorway and watched his daughter hold a woman she had met 18 hours ago on a frozen street corner, and felt the thing in his chest complete one more degree of its slow, irreversible turn. Karen appeared beside him. She said very quietly, She has a good shot, you know, Maria. Diana is excellent, and the situation is stable now. She has a real shot. I know, Vincent said. You did a good thing. He watched Sophia and Maria. He thought about a corner on Wacker in Michigan. He thought about how close it had been, about the version of tonight where the car kept moving. I almost didn't stop, he said. Karen looked at him. But you did. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Sophia pulled back from the hug and looked at Maria with great seriousness. Can I hold David now? Maria laughed. The real kind, full unguarded, the laugh of a person who has just discovered that the muscles for it still work. Yes, she said. Yes, you can. She helped Sophia sit carefully on the couch. She placed David in Sophia's arms, guiding the positioning, one hand ready, watchful without hovering. Sophia looked down at David with the focused concentration of someone entrusted with something precious and aware of it. David looked up at Sophia, or looked in Sophia's direction in the vague, searching way of newborns who are still learning that the world has a center. He made a small sound. Hi, Sophia said quietly. I'm the one who saw you last night, through the window. She tilted her head slightly. I'm going to keep seeing you. Okay, that's what we decided. Vincent from the doorway heard this. He put his hand against the doorframe. He pressed it there, palm flat, like he needed something to hold on to. He looked at the window across the room, the one with the winter light coming through it, the one in an apartment in Lincoln Park that a woman named Karen had arranged in one night because he had made a phone call at 11 o'clock on a Sunday because his daughter had pressed her palms against a car window and refused to look away. He thought about Elena, about 34 years in a dinner she had not come back from, about 4 years of managing a grief he had decided to treat like a business problem, containing it, controlling it, ensuring it never became a vulnerability. He thought about Sophia's voice in the car, 5 words that had not been a request. Her baby isn't moving. He took a long, quiet breath, let it out, and something in Vincent Romano, something he had built very carefully and maintained very deliberately and was very good at defending, let go. Not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way that anyone in the room would have been able to point to and name. Just a quiet internal release, like a fist that has been clenched so long, it has forgotten how to be a hand slowly finally opening. He pushed off the door frame. He walked into the room. He sat in the chair across from the couch. He looked at Sophia holding David. He looked at Maria watching them. He looked at Karen in the kitchen doorway and Diana already making notes on her tablet and Russo downstairs in the car and the whole complicated, improbable architecture of how this morning had become what it was. Then he looked at his daughter's face and he recognized the expression she was wearing. He had seen it once before in a different room, in a different year, on a different face. It was the look Elena used to have when she looked at Sophia, like she was looking at something that confirmed everything she had ever believed about what life was supposed to be for. Diana Chen left at 1 o'clock, but not before she had sat with Maria at the kitchen table for 40 minutes and asked her questions that nobody had ever asked her before. Not intake questions, not the clipboard questions of systems processing a case. Real questions. What did you do before the restaurant closed? What were you good at? What did you want before everything went sideways? Maria had answered them slowly at first, the way a person answers when they're not sure the answers are worth anything, and then faster with more certainty as Diana's responses made it clear that she was not asking in order to judge but in order to build. Vincent sat across the room and did not appear to be listening. He was very clearly listening. Karen left shortly after Diana with a handshake for Vincent and a hug for Sophia that Sophia returned with the same wholehearted completeness she brought to everything. At the door, Karen looked at Vincent over Sophia's head and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." He gave a single nod. Then it was just the 4 of them. Vincent, Sophia, Maria, David. The apartment was quiet in the way that new spaces are quiet, full of potential, not yet broken, and smelling of fresh linens and the faint chemical warmth of a heater running for the first time in a while. Maria had put David in the bassinet in the corner, the duck sleeper, and him, the one Sophia had selected with such confidence. He was asleep. He had been asleep for the better part of an hour, and every 10 minutes or so, Maria's eyes traveled to him with a checking in that was no longer panicked, just present. The difference was enormous. "Are you hungry?" Maria asked. She was already at the kitchen counter, looking through the grocery bags Karen's team had left. Moving, doing. Maria Vincent had already understood was a person who processed difficult things by finding the next useful action. There's actually a lot in here. Someone went very thorough with this. Mrs. Alvarez would say, "That's the only way to do grocery shopping," Sophia said. "Who's Mrs. Alvarez?" "She works for us. She makes eggs and she has opinions about everything." Maria smiled. "I like her already." "You can meet her," Sophia said. "She makes good tamales at Christmas." "Right, Daddy?" Vincent, who had been standing near the window looking at the street below, with the expression of a man who is ostensibly looking at a street, but is actually doing something much more interior, turned around. "She does," he said. Maria was looking at him, not the checking look of earlier, the one that was still measuring angles and exits. Something different now, more direct, more willing to be in the same room with what was actually happening. "Stay for lunch," she said. I know it's your food technically. I know Karen's team bought all of this, but let me make something. Let me do one thing that's mine." The sentence landed with a weight that went beyond the words. Vincent understood it immediately. In a situation in which virtually everything had been given arranged, provided the one act of agency was to feed the people who had fed her. "All right," he said. Sophia was already pulling herself up onto a kitchen stool. "What are you making? What do you like?" "Everything." "That's very helpful. I especially like things with cheese." Maria laughed, that real laugh again. It came more easily now than it had at the hospital, which was itself a kind of measurement of the last 18 hours. "I can work with that." She moved around the kitchen with a comfort that seemed to surprise even her, like someone discovering that a skill they had stored in a box is still exactly where they left it. She had been a cook. She had said that to Dinah not just worked in a restaurant, but actually cooked, had trained under a chef who told her she had instincts that couldn't be taught, had imagined before everything collapsed a version of her future that had a kitchen at its center. Vincent had heard that part. He had filed it. He watched her work now and thought about Rosa Carmine, about how Rosa had moved in a kitchen with that same unhesitating ease, the ease of someone for whom cooking was not a task, but a language. He thought about how long it had been since anyone had cooked in a kitchen while he sat near enough to watch. Mrs. Alvarez cooked, but Vincent was never in the kitchen when she did. He had developed over the years a habit of entering rooms after the human activity in them had concluded. "You're quiet," Maria said, not looking up from the counter. "I'm usually quiet," he said. "Not the same kind of quiet as last night." He looked at her. She was slicing an onion with the controlled efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times and was not going to cry about it, which was either skill or willpower or both. She still wasn't looking at him, but her attention was entirely on him. He had learned in a lifetime of reading rooms to recognize the difference between someone not looking at you and someone choosing not to look at you while remaining acutely aware of you. "What kind of quiet was last night?" he asked. "Controlled," she said. "Like every thought had a lid on it." She paused. "Right now you seem like a man who's run out of lids." Sophia looked at her father with bright interest. "I'm fine," he said. "I didn't say you weren't," Maria said. The onions went into the pan. The sound of them hitting the heat filled the kitchen, and the smell followed immediately, warm and ordinary and sharp, and something about it, the absolute normality of it, the way it made the apartment suddenly feel occupied rather than arranged, did something subtle and permanent to the quality of light in the room. "Can I ask you something?" Maria said. "You can ask." "Your work." She kept her eyes on the pan. "I don't know exactly what you do. I mean," she paused, chose her words. "I can make educated guesses based on the way people respond to your name." "Maria, I'm not asking for details. I'm not asking you to explain yourself." She looked up now, briefly, directly. "I just want to know if any of this, any of what you did last night, today, if it comes with conditions, I need to understand." The kitchen was very quiet under the sound of the onions. Sophia had gone still on her stool. She was looking at the counter, giving the conversation the polite non-attention of a child who has learned that some adult exchanges require a degree of invisible presence. Vincent pulled the other kitchen stool out from under the counter and sat down. He sat the way he'd sat in the hospital, forward elbows on knees, no managed distance. Direct. "No conditions," he said. "No obligations, no debt." He held her gaze. "My world operates in transactions. I understand that's what it looks like when someone from my world does something. I understand why you're asking." He paused. "But this is separate from my world. This was Sophia. This was—" He stopped, started again honestly. "This was something I needed to do, for reasons that have nothing to do with what I normally need." Maria looked at him for a long moment. The onions were starting to catch. She turned back and moved them automatically, the cook's reflex operating independently of whatever her mind was doing. "Okay," she said. "Okay. I believe you." She said it simply, matter-of-factly, like it was a decision that had been made and did not require further negotiation. "I'm not naive, I know what you are, and I'm not pretending otherwise. But I believe that this specific thing is what you said it is." She added something to the pan. "I'm good at reading people. You have to be when you have nothing left but your ability to read a room." "Yes," Vincent said, "you do." Something passed between them in that moment, not romantic, not transactional, not any of the things it might have looked like from outside. Something closer to recognition. Two people who had learned by completely different roads and for completely different reasons that the world does not announce its intentions and you have to learn to read it or it will eat you alive. Then David made a sound from the bassinet, not crying. A sound preceding crying, the gathering sound, the building sound, the sound of an opinion forming. Maria was moving before it fully arrived, pan still on the stove, turning the burner down in a single practice motion and crossing to the bassinet in 3 steps. "Hey," she said softly, picking him up. "Hey, I'm right here." David escalated briefly, one real cry, indignant, fully committed, and then settled as his mother's voice and hands located him in the world. He blinked. His face went through 3 expressions in 4 seconds, which was ambitious for a 3-week-old. "He's very dramatic," Sophia observed. "He is," Maria agreed. She looked down at him. "He gets that from me." "My daddy is dramatic too," Sophia said, "but he hides it." Vincent said, "Sophia, you do daddy, you have very dramatic eyebrows." Maria made the sound, the laugh-adjacent sound. "She's not wrong," she said, not looking at him, looking at David, but the line of her mouth was doing something that had a great deal of warmth in it. "I'm going to speak with Russo," Vincent said, standing up. He said it with the dignity of a man declining to be further discussed. He stepped into the hallway. He didn't call Russo. He stood in the hallway outside the apartment door and put his back against the wall and let out a slow breath that he had apparently been holding for longer than he'd realized. He could hear through the door Sophia explaining to Maria the correct technique for holding David information Sophia had acquired entirely that morning and was deploying with total authority, and Maria responding with the patient amusement of someone who is being instructed by a 7-year-old and finding it genuinely not irritating. He took out his phone, he looked at it, he opened the contacts again. Father Benedetto. He called before he thought about it too much, which was the only way it was going to happen. It rang twice. 3 times, he was almost relieved. Then Vincent Romano. The priest's voice was unhurried, unsurprised. Like a call from Vincent was the most natural thing in the world, like 14 months of silence was simply a pause in a conversation that neither of them had closed. Merry Christmas Eve. Father, Vincent's voice came out differently than he expected, rougher at the edges. I need to. He stopped. He had not planned what came after I need to. He hadn't gotten that far. I think I need to come see you. A pause on the other end, short, careful. I'm at the church until 4 today. After Mass tonight, I'll be in the rectory. Tonight, Vincent said. Tonight, Father Benedetto confirmed. I'll be here. Vincent hung up. He stood in the hallway for another moment. He thought about Elena. He thought about 4 years of lids on things. He thought about a corner on Wacker in Michigan and 5 words that had blown every lid off everything. He went back inside. Lunch was eggs with onions and peppers and cheese served on the kitchen table on plates from Karen's team's supply kit eaten with forks from a set still in its packaging. It was objectively a completely ordinary meal. It was the best meal Vincent had eaten in recent memory, and he was honest enough with himself by that point in the day to understand exactly why. Sophia ate with the focused enthusiasm of someone encountering genuine quality and wanting to honor it. This is better than Mrs. Alvarez's eggs, she said. Don't tell Mrs. Alvarez that, Vincent said. I would never, but it's true. She looked at Maria. You should cook professionally. I used to, Maria said. You should again. Sophia, Vincent said, a mild caution. Diana said there were options, Sophia said with the unruffled certainty of someone who had heard this information and stored it. She said that when she comes back in January, she has restaurant contacts. I heard her tell Maria in the kitchen. Maria looked at her. You hear a lot. People underestimate how much children hear, Sophia said. It's their main advantage. What's their main disadvantage? Maria asked. Sophia considered this seriously. Bedtimes, she said. David propped in Maria's arm while she ate one-handed, with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this for 3 weeks, made a sound that was either commentary or digestion. Sophia decided it was commentary and laughed. The afternoon settled into something that had no name and needed none. Sophia sat with David while Maria cleaned the kitchen, and they had a conversation that was largely one-sided, but in which Sophia held up her end with complete commitment, explaining to David the plot of her favorite book, her opinion on the Christmas pageant angel costume, and the specific reasons why the red sweater with the reindeer was a superior holiday garment. David tracked her face with the vague, earnest attention of a person trying very hard to learn a language. Vincent sat nearby and watched his daughter and felt the afternoon doing something to him that he did not try to stop. He was aware somewhere in the back of his mind that there were things that needed his attention. The warehouse. DeMarco. 3 days of accumulated business that had been waiting since last night with varying degrees of patience. His world did not pause for Christmas Eve. It had never paused for anything. He was aware of all of that, and he left his phone in his pocket, and he watched Sophia talk to a 3-week-old about reindeer sweaters. At 3:15, his phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Not about the warehouse, not about DeMarco. It said, heard what happened last night. Good thing, boss. Vincent stared at the text. Tony was not a man who editorialized. Tony drove and stood where he was told to stand and performed his functions with the reliable efficiency of someone who had learned that unsolicited commentary was not a survival strategy. In 14 years, Vincent could count on one hand the number of times Tony had offered an opinion that wasn't asked for. He typed back, keep it to yourself, then he deleted it, then he sent nothing. He put the phone back in his pocket. Good thing, boss. He thought about what his world would say. Not Tony. Tony had already said it. The others. The men who operated inside the framework Vincent had constructed. The framework where strength was defined by what you didn't feel, and power was measured by what you didn't need. The men who would process last night's events and file them somewhere that made them manageable. An impulse, a daughter's request, a moment that did not need to be discussed. He thought about what he would have said 3 years ago, even 2 years ago, about a night like this one. He thought about the clean, sealed world he had maintained, its efficiency, its lack of exposure, the way grief and need and wanting things had no purchase on a surface that smooth. He thought about how tired he was of that surface. Vincent, Maria's voice from the kitchen doorway. He looked up. She was leaning against the door frame, arms crossed, looking at him with the same direct, undefended look she'd been developing since the hospital. It was the look of someone who has decided to stop being smaller than their actual size. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't mean your apartment or the caseworker. I mean," she searched for the word, "with this, with us knowing each other." Sophia looked up from David. Vincent looked at Maria, then at his daughter, then back at Maria. "Sophia said she's coming to see the David again," he said. "I did," Sophia confirmed. "So I suppose that's what happens. We know each other." He paused. "Is that a problem?" Maria looked at him for a long moment. "It's not a problem," she said. "It's just new." She looked down briefly. "The people in my life before, when things got bad, they found reasons. Good reasons, some of them. Logical reasons. But they found them." She looked back up. "I'm not used to people moving towards something instead of away from it." "I know the feeling," Vincent said. The moment held. Then Sophia said from the couch in a voice that was entirely too casual to be accidental, "Daddy called someone from the church this morning." From the hallway. The casual voice was a precision instrument. Vincent recognized it because he had watched it develop over 7 years. "Sophia, what you did?" Maria looked at him. Her expression was careful, curious but not pushing. "Father Benedetto," Vincent said, because evidently there was no version of this conversation in which he did not explain himself. "He knew my wife. I haven't spoken to him in over a year." A pause. "I called him this morning." "To talk about Elena," Maria asked quietly. "To talk about a lot of things I've been not talking about for 4 years. He said it plainly, without performance. The way you say something that is simply true, and you have decided to stop carrying the weight of hiding it. The room was quiet. Sophia put her cheek against the top of David's head, gently, carefully, in a gesture so exactly like the one Maria had made on the corner the night before that Maria's breath caught audibly. "She used to do that," Vincent said, very quietly. "Elena, with Sophia when she was this small, that exact thing." Maria looked at him. There were no careful words for the moment they were in, and both of them knew it, and neither of them tried to find any. "She sounds like someone worth grieving properly," Maria said. "Yes," Vincent said, "she is." He stood up. Not to leave, he just needed to be vertical for a moment, to have somewhere to put the thing that was moving through him. He walked to the window. He stood there for 30 seconds. Then he turned back around. "I should go tonight," he said. "Sophia needs to sleep and I have—" He stopped. "I have somewhere to be." He looked at Maria. "Tomorrow, Christmas. Do you have plans?" Maria looked at him with wide eyes and a silence that answered the question. "Then we'll come," he said. If that's all right." She opened her mouth, closed it. Something moved across her face that was too large and too honest for a simple expression. "It's all right," she said. "Sophia." He looked at his daughter. "Say goodbye to David." Sophia looked down at David with the focused gravity of someone conducting a formal farewell. "Goodbye, David," she said. "I'll see you tomorrow. Christmas is a good day to meet someone properly. Remember that." She looked at David's face for another moment. "He understands more than people think," she said to no one in particular. "I think you're right," Maria said. Vincent helped Sophia into her coat. Maria stood near the door, David in her arms, watching the process with the expression she had been developing all afternoon, open, present, not bracing for anything. At the door, Sophia hugged her. The same way as at the hospital, full, uncalculated, both arms. Maria held on with one arm, David tucked against the other side and pressed her lips briefly to the top of Sophia's head. "Thank you," Maria said over Sophia's head, looking at Vincent, "for stopping the car." "Thanks, Sophia," he said for the 3rd time. "I am," Maria said. "I'm also thanking you." He looked at her. He held the look for a moment, letting it be what it was, not managing it into something smaller. "We'll see you tomorrow," he said. He took Sophia's hand and they walked down the hall to the elevator. Sophia pushed the button and they waited, and she was quiet in the processing way, turning something over, examining it from different angles. "Daddy," she said. "Yeah. Are you glad we stopped the car?" The elevator arrived, the doors opened. He guided her inside, pressed the lobby button, stood beside her with her hand still in his. "Yes," he said. "I'm glad we stopped the car." She nodded as if this confirmed something. Then she leaned against his arm and the elevator descended, and outside the building, Russo was waiting at the curb with the engine running and the heat going, and the Chicago sky was doing the thing it does in the late afternoon of Christmas Eve, turning a color that is almost purple, almost navy, with the last of the daylight going reluctantly at the edges. Sophia stopped on the sidewalk. She tilted her head back and looked at the sky. She was quiet for a moment. "Mommy would have liked Maria," she said. The words landed in Vincent's chest like something he had been waiting to hear without knowing he was waiting. He looked at the sky. He thought about Elena. He thought about 34 years in a dinner in a room he had not been able to go back into for 4 years. Not all the way. He thought about lids on things. He thought about a hallway outside an apartment in Lincoln Park where he had made a phone call he had been not making for 14 months. "Yes," he said. "She would have." Sophia looked at him. She reached up and took his hand with both of hers and held it the way she had when she was very small, and the world was very large, and he was the only fixed point in it. The way she hadn't held his hand in a long time because she was 7 now and had opinions about independence. "It's okay to miss her," Sophia said. "I miss her too, but I think she's not that far." He looked down at his daughter. His throat closed just briefly, just enough to matter. "I think so too," he said. Russo held the door. They got in. The city moved past the windows, lit up in the cold Christmas Eve in Chicago. A million lives going on in a million windows, each one containing its own version of this, its own distance and closeness, its own cost and grace, its own version of the thing that happens when someone stops a car on a frozen corner and lets a 7-year-old lead the way. Vincent Romano looked at his city and felt something in his chest that he had no practiced word for and did not try to name. He knew what it was. He had just forgotten how it worked. Father Benedetto was exactly where he said he would be. The rectory office was small and warm and smelled of old books and candle wax, and the priest himself was a compact man in his late 60s with white hair and the unhurried eyes of someone who had been sitting with difficult things for so long that he had made a kind of peace with the sitting. He stood when Vincent came through the door. He did not look surprised. He did not look relieved the way people sometimes look when someone they have been worrying about finally arrives. He simply looked with those steady eyes like a man who had left a light on and was glad it had been useful. "Vincent," he said, "Father." They shook hands. Then, before Vincent had calculated whether or not he was going to do it, before the managing part of his brain could file an objection, he let the priest grip his hand for a moment longer than a handshake required, and he did not pull back. He sat. Father Benedetto sat across from him. Between them, a desk with a lamp and a Bible, and a cup of tea going cold. "I should have called sooner," Vincent said. "You called when you could," Father Benedetto said. No accusation, no performance of magnanimity, just a plain statement of fact offered and then set down. "I don't know how to do this," Vincent said. I'm not a man who talks about things. I built a life around not talking about things, and it worked. It worked well enough." He stopped. "Last night something happened, something I didn't plan, and it opened." He pressed his hand flat against his sternum, briefly, a gesture so uncharacteristic that he registered it himself with a kind of distant surprise. "It opened something." "Tell me," Father Benedetto said. So Vincent told him all of it. The car, the corner Sophia's hands on the glass, Maria and David in the hospital waiting room, the coat, the phone call to Karen Halsey at 11 o'clock at night, the apartment in Lincoln Park, lunch on Christmas Eve with a woman he had met 18 hours earlier and a 3-week-old who held onto fingers with the grip of someone who already knew the world could be taken away. He told it in order, without editorializing the way he reported things, but his voice was doing things it did not usually do, catching in places, going quieter in others, and he let it do those things without correcting them. Father Benedetto listened without interrupting. When Vincent finished, the room was quiet for a moment. "You've been punishing yourself," the priest said. Vincent looked at him. "I haven't." "Not deliberately. Not consciously. Father Benedetto leaned forward slightly. Elena died and you decided that the price was feeling everything she would have felt, being responsible for everything she would have handled, keeping every door she would have opened closed. As though if you made yourself small enough, contained enough, the space where she was would stay preserved. He paused. But a preserved space is not a living one, Vincent. And you know that. You've known it for a while. Vincent looked at the desk, at the lamp, at the tea going cold between them. Sophia told me tonight, he said, that her mother is not that far. Father Benedetto smiled, not a small, careful smile, a full one, the kind that arrived without asking permission. She is Elena's daughter all the way through, he said. Yes, Vincent said. His voice was very quiet. She is. And what Elena would want, I know what Elena would want. He said it quickly with an edge to it, not at the priesthood himself at the 4 years of knowing and not doing. I know exactly what she would want. She would want me to stop treating my life like something to be managed from a safe distance. She would want Sophia to grow up in a house where her father was actually present and not just occupying the building. He stopped. She would have stopped the car last night before Sophia finished the sentence. Yes, Father Benedetto said. She would have. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the kind of silence that does work. I need to confess, Vincent said. And then after a beat, with the particular honesty of a man who knows the weight of what he's about to say, I need to confess a great many things, and not just the ones that happened in the last 4 years. Father Benedetto looked at him steadily. I know what you are, Vincent. I knew it when Elena introduced you to me. I knew it when I stood at her graveside. He folded his hands on the desk. I am not here to adjudicate your life. I am here because you came, and because coming is itself the beginning of something. A pause. Whatever you need to say, this is the room for it. Vincent took a slow breath, and he began to talk. He was there for 2 hours. He left the rectory at 9:15 on Christmas Eve with the particular feeling of a man who has put down something very heavy that he has been carrying so long he had forgotten it wasn't attached to him. Not lighter exactly, the weight didn't disappear, but distributed differently, held differently, by more than just him. He sat in the car outside for a moment. Russo in the front seat said nothing. Russo had been saying nothing professionally for 14 years and was very good at it. Vincent took out his phone. He had 7 missed calls and 11 texts, none of which he had any intention of addressing tonight. He scrolled past all of them. He opened his messages and found Maria's name. She had texted him in the early evening. A short message, David ate twice and went down easy. The apartment is warm. Thank you for today. And then after a pause visible in the timestamp, Merry Christmas Eve, Vincent. He looked at the message for a moment. Then he typed back, Merry Christmas Eve. We'll be there by 10. He watched the screen. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then we'll be awake. David runs an early schedule, whether I like it or not. Despite everything, the 2 hours in the rectory, the weight in his chest, the 14 months of locked rooms beginning to unlock all at once, Vincent Romano almost smiled. Not almost, he smiled. In the back of a car on Christmas Eve by himself, like a person who has forgotten they were capable of it and is mildly astonished to discover otherwise. He put the phone in his pocket. Home Russo. Russo drove. Christmas morning arrived in Chicago the way it always did, quiet in a way the city never quite managed on any other day, as though even the infrastructure had agreed to take a breath. Vincent was up before 7. He had slept, which surprised him. Not the thin, managed sleep of a man keeping one ear on everything, actual sleep, deep and without interruption. The sleep of someone who had set something down before bed and not picked it back up in the night. Sophia was up at 7:15. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas with the reindeer on them, a different reindeer set than the sweater, an entire reindeer wardrobe apparently, and looked at her father with immediate alert eyes. Are we going to Maria's at 10? It's 7:15. I'm aware. That's a long time. Sophia. I'm just noting the duration. She climbed onto a kitchen stool. Can we bring something? It's Christmas. You're supposed to bring something. Mrs. Alvarez made tamales yesterday. Sophia's eyes went very wide. Yes, she said. We're bringing those. Mrs. Alvarez, who had arrived at 7 because Mrs. Alvarez had no concept of Christmas as a day of reduced operations, appeared from the back of the kitchen, holding a covered dish with the expression of someone who had been expecting to be asked. "Already packed," she said. "I also made rice pudding because the baby's mother will need to eat, not just the two of you." Sophia looked at her father with the triumphant expression of someone whose instincts have been vindicated by an external authority. "Thank you, Mrs. Alvarez," Vincent said. Mrs. Alvarez set the dish down and studied him for a moment with the proprietary assessment she had earned through 9 years of proximity. "You look different today," she said. "Different how?" She tilted her head. "Like yourself," she said, and went back to the stove before he could respond to that. They arrived at the Lincoln Park apartment at 10 past 10. Sophia carried the rice pudding with the focused gravity of someone transporting an artifact. Vincent carried the tamales. Russo stayed with the car without being asked. Maria buzzed them up without waiting for them to identify themselves. The door to the apartment was open by the time they reached the second floor, and she was standing in the doorway with David in her arms and an expression that did something complicated and immediate to the air in the hallway. She was different. Not dramatically, she was still Maria, still the direct eyes and the contained composure, and the face that said everything it meant to say and nothing it didn't. But the 11 days were less visible. The held-together quality, the careful management of every surface had loosened very slightly at the edges. She was standing in her own doorway. She was wearing clothes that fit. David was in a clean sleeper, not the duck one, a different one, green with small white stars, and he was awake and conducting his vague, earnest survey of available faces. "Merry Christmas," Maria said. "Merry Christmas," Sophia said with great seriousness, holding out the rice pudding. "Mrs. Alvarez made this. She's a very good cook, which I maybe shouldn't admit because of the egg situation, but it would be dishonest not to." Maria took the dish. "The egg situation." "My eggs are better," Sophia said, stepping inside. "She knows it. It's just not something we discuss." Maria looked at Vincent over Sophia's head. Her mouth was doing the thing it had started doing yesterday, the thing that was more than amusement and less than whatever came next, the thing that didn't have a name, but that he had found himself thinking about on the drive over. "Come in," she said. The apartment had become in less than 24 hours a place where someone lived, not staged, not arranged, lived in. The small changes were everywhere, a cloth draped over the bassinet, David's few things organized on the small dresser with a mother's specific logic, 2 cups on the counter, from the morning's coffee, a book open face down on the couch cushion. It was the archaeology of a person settling into a space, and it hit Vincent with a warmth he had not prepared for. Sophia went directly to David. She had been waiting with visible patience for exactly this moment, and now that it had arrived, she settled herself on the couch and looked at Maria with the expression of a person presenting credentials. "May I?" she asked. "You may," Maria said. David was placed. Sophia assumed the responsibility, immediately adjusting her arms with the competence of someone who had held him twice now and considered herself experienced. David looked at her, the wide, whole-face attention. "Hi," Sophia said. "It's me. I've told you I'd come back." She tilted her head. "You look better today. Your cheeks are pinker." "That's good." Vincent sat in the chair from yesterday. Maria sat on the couch with a cup of coffee she'd collected from the counter on the way past, and the four of them settled into the particular rhythm that had been developing since a hospital waiting room at 10 o'clock the previous night. Easy in a way that should not have been possible, given the timeline that had no logical explanation, except that some things do not operate on logic. "How did you sleep?" Vincent asked. "Twice," Maria said. "David's schedule." A pause. But actually slept, both times. She looked at her cup. "I don't think I've slept without one ear completely open since, She stopped. "A long time." "Good," he said. She looked at him. The direct look, the one that had been building its confidence since the hospital. "You look like you slept too." "I did." "That's different from how you looked at 2 in the afternoon yesterday." "You mentioned I'd run out of lids." "You had," she said, not unkindly. "Did something happen after you left?" He looked at Sophia, who was narrating something to David in a low, focused voice, and was not paying attention to them in a way that was just slightly too deliberate to be genuine. He looked at Maria. "I went to see a priest," he said, "a friend of my wife's. Someone I should have called a year ago. He held her gaze. It was a long conversation. It covered a lot of ground. A pause. It was necessary. Maria was quiet for a moment. Was it? She chose her words carefully. Was it okay? Are you okay, Mahal? The question. Simple. 4 words. The thing people said automatically, reflexively, without really wanting the answer. But from Maria, it was not automatic. It was not reflexive. It was the question of someone who had been asked in the worst possible moment what's wrong and who understood the specific, non-negotiable weight of asking it and meaning it. I'm getting there, he said. That's more honest than yes. Mara, getting there is enough, she said. Something settled between them at that, not resolved, nothing that real resolves in 2 days, but acknowledged. Held between 2 people without being dropped or deflected or managed into something smaller. Sophia looked up from David. She looked at her father. She looked at Maria. She looked back at David. David, she said seriously, you have very good timing being born. Maria laughed. Vincent felt it in his chest, the laugh, the room, the tamales on the counter, and the rice pudding, and his daughter on a couch on Christmas morning, holding a baby who was alive because she had pressed her palms against a car window and refused to look away. He thought about his conversation with Father Benedetto, about the things he had said in that room that he had not said anywhere in 4 years, about the word the priest had used, punishing, and the specific terrible accuracy of it. He had been punishing himself with control, with distance, with the sealed and managed surface of a life that looked from the outside like strength and was, from the inside, the most elaborate avoidance he had ever constructed. He had built an empire on fear. He had run the most feared organization in Chicago for 30 years. He had sat across tables from men who could not meet his eyes without flinching. And none of that, not 1 inch of it, had required a fraction of the courage that Sophia had shown on a street corner at 9:40 on a December night, walking up to a stranger in the cold and saying, "Hi, I'm Sophia, what's wrong with your baby?" The thought arrived quietly. Then it arrived more fully. Then it lodged somewhere he knew it was going to stay. "Maria," he said. She looked at him. "Diana's coming in January with the restaurant contacts." He paused. "There's a restaurant not in my world, nothing connected to anything. It's in River North. A man named Castellano owns it. He's been looking for a sous chef for 3 months. He trained in Naples, he runs a serious kitchen, and he has the reputation of being someone who gives people second chances because he was given one himself." He held her gaze. "If you want, I can make an introduction." Not a favor, an introduction. What happens after that is between you and him. Maria looked at him carefully. "How do you know him?" "I know everyone in this city," he said. "That's not the same as owning them. Castellano is a good man. What I'm offering is a phone call, not a guarantee." She was quiet for a moment. He could see the calculation, not suspicious, not the calculating of an angle, but the careful, honest weighing of someone who had decided to stop saying no to things out of pride when the things being offered were real. "Okay," she said. "Yes, if that's a real offer, yes." "It's a real offer." "Then yes." Sophia looked up. She had clearly been listening with the invisible attention she deployed so effectively. "See, David," she said, looking down at the baby. "Things are working out. I told you they would. The morning moved the way Christmas mornings are supposed to move, without urgency, without agenda, with the particular quality of time that only arrives when the people in a room have, all for different reasons, and by different roads, decided that the moment they are in is sufficient. Mrs. Alvarez's tamales were received with an appreciation that was genuine enough to make Vincent resolve to tell her so when he got home, which he recognized as a change since he did not typically volunteer assessments of meals. The rice pudding was consumed with David asleep in the bassinet and Sophia conducting what she called a formal taste evaluation, delivering her verdict with the gravity of a judge. 10 out of 10, she announced, but don't tell her I said that either. "I live in fear of the day you decide to stop keeping secrets," Maria said. "I only keep the ones worth keeping," Sophia said. At 1 o'clock, Vincent's phone buzzed. He looked at it, not the careful, compulsive checking of the previous day, but the ordinary checking of someone who has remembered that they have a phone. It was a text from Diana Chen, "Happy Christmas. For what it's worth, Maria Santos is going to be fine. That one has a spine of steel. You and your daughter did a good thing." He showed it to Maria without thinking about whether to. She read it. Her jaw tightened briefly in the specific way of someone receiving a compliment, they are not yet entirely sure they deserve. A spine of steel, she said. Is she wrong? He asked. Maria looked down at David in the bassinet, at his sleeping face which had been gray 24 hours ago and was now the pink of something that had decided to stay. No, she said. She's not wrong. The afternoon came. Sophia had fallen into the easy, unhurried contentment of a child who has exactly what she wants and is in no rush for anything to change. She sat with David when he was awake, spoke to him with the patient, consistent attention of someone investing in a long-term relationship, and updated Vincent periodically on David's progress with the precision of a field correspondent. He made eye contact with me for 4 seconds, she reported. Sustained eye contact. That's development. Is it? Maria said, amused. I read about it this morning. Newborns start tracking faces in the first month. He's ahead of schedule. She looked at David with satisfaction. He's very smart. He gets that from his mother, Vincent said. Maria looked at him. The look was brief but clear. At 3, Vincent stood to leave. Not because he wanted to, and the fact of not wanting to the fact that he registered its absence as a specific and genuine thing rather than a social calculation was itself something new. He stood because Sophia needed to eat a real dinner, and because there were things he had agreed in the rectory the night before to do, and one of them was starting to take responsibility for the parts of his life that had been running on autopilot toward places he did not intend to go. Same time tomorrow, Sophia asked Maria with no pretense of it being a casual question. Maria looked at Vincent. He looked back at her. The conversation and the look was a real one, brief and honest, between two people who had stopped performing carefulness with each other sometime around 11 the previous evening. We'll call first, Vincent said. But yes, Maria walked them to the door. Sophia hugged her the same way she had every time, completely without qualification, as though she had been doing it for years and intended to continue. Maria held on, and this time she did not have one arm occupied. Both arms full, her face pressed briefly into Sophia's hair. When she straightened up, her eyes were bright. She didn't hide it. She looked at Vincent. Thank you, she said. Not for the apartment, not for the tamales, or the introduction to Castellano, or the call to Karen Halsey at 11 o'clock at night. All of that was in the sentence, but it wasn't the sentence. The sentence was bigger than any of its components. It was the thank you for stopping the car, for not keeping driving, for the specific, irreversible act of a man choosing at the precise moment when his whole constructed life was pushing him in the other direction to stop. Vincent looked at her. At the door she was holding open. At the apartment behind her, warm and lit and inhabited. At David in the bassinet, visible past her shoulder, breathing the slow, absolute breathing of someone who has been retrieved from the edge of something and doesn't yet have words for what that means. Take care of him, he said. I will, she said, without hesitation. I will. He and Sophia walked down the hall. The elevator came. They rode down in the comfortable quiet they had developed. Not the managed quiet of two people around whom certain topics did not exist, but the real quiet of two people who had run out of anything urgent to say and were fine with that. In the lobby, Sophia stopped. Daddy, she said. He stopped beside her. Are you going to call Father Benedetto again? He looked at her. Yes, he said. I am. She nodded. And Mr. Castellano, about Maria in the restaurant. Monday, he said. She nodded again. Processing. Satisfied. She looked at the lobby door through which Russo was visible at the curb, his breath making clouds in the cold. She looked at the elevator they had just come out of and by implication at the apartment 2 floors above them. She looked at her father. I think, she said with the measured certainty of someone delivering a conclusion they have been working toward for some time, that this is the best thing we ever did. Vincent looked at his daughter, 7 years old, red reindeer pajamas under her coat, silver bracelet with the star charm, eyes that were her mother's eyes carrying her mother's absolute undefended belief that the world was full of things worth stopping for. He thought about a corner on Wacker in Michigan, about the word that had been on his lips, keep going, and the 5 words that had replaced it. He thought about a coat laid across a woman's shoulders in the freezing dark, about a hospital waiting room and a cooking show on mute, and a doctor who said you got him here in time. He thought about 2 hours in a rectory and the particular feeling of setting something down. He thought about rice pudding and David's pink cheeks and the way Maria had held his daughter with both arms. He thought about what the version of him from 36 hours ago would have said about all of this, about the life he had been living inside his sealed, efficient, grief-preserved world, and the night that had broken every window in it open at once. He thought about Elena, about what she would have said if she could have seen tonight. He thought about the look she used to have and the look Sophia had had on the couch this morning and the fact that they were the same look and what it meant that he could finally see that without looking away. He crouched down so he was level with his daughter. He held her face in both hands briefly, the gesture she had always loved, and he had not made enough because the man he had been was careful about the things he held. He looked at her. "It is," he said, "it is the best thing we ever did." Sophia smiled at him. Full unguarded, the kind that is not performing happiness, but simply is it. He stood. He took her hand. He pushed open the lobby door, and the cold Chicago air came in to meet them. And Russo was at the curb, and the city was doing what the city does on Christmas afternoon, sitting in something close to stillness, all its machinery temporarily at rest, its million windows lit from within. They got in the car. Russo pulled away from the curb. And Vincent Romano, who had spent 4 years building the most effective wall a man could build against the particular kind of pain that comes from loving people in a world that can take them without warning, felt that wall complete its final quiet, irreversible collapse, not because it had been torn down, but because a 7-year-old girl had simply walked through it as though it wasn't there. And a homeless mother on a frozen corner had shown him that the other side of survival was still, if you let it be, a life worth living. He had stopped the car. That was the beginning of everything.